We are very fortunate to have Michael Webb, our keynote speaker today, talking to us about the hot topic of the day, which is AI in education. Since ChatGPT burst on the scene, when was it, November 2022, something like that. I don't know about you, but that's all I've seen on my education Twitter feed and more generally. In fact, isn't it GPT-4 now?
Absolutely,
yeah. There you go. I'm trying to keep up, but I think nobody can keep up, but that's the whole point. So a few words about Michael. Michael Webb leads Jisc's research and development software team, working on longer-term ideas around how technologies such as artificial intelligence can support and enhance education and research. And I think Michael has been in the AI business well before it became fashionable. For those who don't know, Jisc is the UK digital data technology agency, a not-for-profit agency, I believe, focused on tertiary education, research, and innovation. So Michael is going to help us navigate the opportunities and challenges of AI in education. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, and it's lovely to be here. I've done so many of these that have been webinars and online, that to be face-to-face is really nice. So Marie's told you a bit about Jisc. I'm based in our Bristol office. I come from just down the road near Newport, which is also very nice for today. I'll tell you a bit about what we're doing in Jisc and my role there. So a couple of years ago, we were concerned that the UK was perhaps falling behind in its use of AI, and we set something up called National Centre for AI in Tertiary Education. And part of my role is to co-lead this activity. And we've taken a very kind of hands-on approach with that. So we've run pilots of interesting AI applications, and I'll tell you about a couple of those today. We do things like provide information, hold events, and we've got a really big community based around Jismail mailing list that you're welcome to join. I'll tell you about that at the end. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to kick off with a little bit about understanding generative AI. Now, obviously, my background is not language education, but I'm going to pick out some bits and pieces there that I think are particularly interested around language here, particularly as these things are based on large language models. And then I'm going to talk about a few challenges and opportunities. So I'm going to kick off assessment because we can't avoid talking about that, but I hope there's more to it than that. We'll talk about then about meeting students' needs and expectations. So we've run a few workshops with students, got them to talk about what they're doing, which I think is quite interesting. And then some of the opportunities, I'm going to talk about saving staff time and new learning and teaching opportunities. And also these are kind of very much evolving areas. So I'm going to share some bits and pieces, but don't expect kind of loads of answers there. So I just want to kick off to find out, though, how many of you, first of all, have used ChatGPT?
How many people have tried?
How many people have tried? Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, that's a good section. How many use it regularly? Right, good, Phil. Excellent. Okay, I think I probably pitched things about right in that case, but we shall see. So let's kick off with about understanding generative AI. So idea here is that to really kind of use it well, it's good to have a basic understanding of how it works and what's behind it. So I'm going to kind of run through a few bits and pieces there before we look at the use case of it. And I think it's fair to say that things have moved really quickly over the last 12 months. You know that, really. But the last month, 6 months, have been kind of insane, even for people working full-time in it, to keep track of it. And there's some kind of relevance really there about how we react to it, which I'll come on to in a moment. So most of us became aware of this in November 2022, when ChatGPT was first released. I think what we perhaps don't realise is the first version was actually released in 2018, and it had been all GPT. And it was kind of rubbish then, I'll be perfectly honest. You could have gibberish conversations with it if you're a techie. So people like me were playing with it and thinking, okay, this might evolve. But it gradually got better and better over the over the 4-year period. And the reason I say that is if you use it today and think, it's not brilliant, yeah, the path of improvement over the last 4 years has been really quite amazing to watch. It's a lot more than just ChatGPT. So this is just kind of some of the examples on. So chat you're aware of, but there's not just ChatGPT. There's a more open one called Claude. It's getting introduced into Bing as chat. A lot of your students are probably using it in places like Snapchat, where it's got an AI buddy, which has got a much more chatty, friendly scenario. It's in your search engines, so Bing Search now uses it. There's something called Bard. There's tools like Perplexity that are just focused on it. Image tools, I'm sure you've all seen AI-generated images. Things like coding, not relevant to you. Writing tools, they've actually been around for a little while, but it's moving into the ones we're more familiar with. So things like Grammarly have now got generative AI. And there's a whole bunch of things that are around just creating generative AI content. And I'll show you one of those, because they're quite fun to watch, some of them. And there are loads more. It's kind of impossible to count, but I had a look. There's something called Futurepedia. So when I put the presentation together, I had a look to see how many have been added that day, and it was 27. Yeah, so nobody's going to be able to keep track of all the generative AI applications that come out. What we're trying to do at Jisc is kind of at least pick the best of them and tell people about them. One of the interesting ones. It's coming into our everyday tools, so it's coming into Microsoft Office. It's integrated into Google Docs already. This came out, I think it's the week before last now, actually, forgive me. It was last week when I put the slide together. Let's see if my little videos work. It's quite interesting to watch this. So this is just a straightforward word processor. I'm creating a new document. It just says straight away, help me write. So I'm going to ask it to write an intro. Excuse my slow typing there, but it's better than watching me type in real time, which was always a disaster. Off it goes. Yeah, and it's going to have a go at it. Yeah, so I've not gone somewhere separate to GPP. This is the first thing that I'm presented with, if that's my tool. There we go, it's come up with something. It's too long, so I've just chosen an option to ask it to shorten. Okay, shortened version. If I wanted to, when it comes up, I could put it into Translate then and put it into any language, but just put it straight into the document. So this is going to fundamentally change how we write, because it's the first thing we see. We're not going to be able to kind of get away from it. It's not just writing that can do that kind of thing. There are all sorts of tools. I'm going to pick one that is around presentation. So this is one called Gamma. It's a presentation creation tool. I'll just show you this one in action. So I'm going to go into it. I'm going to say, create me a presentation about AI in education. Note there it says create in any language. I'm asking it in English, but I've got the language set to French. So, excuse me if it comes up with stuff that's not perfect or doesn't make sense, but off it goes. I just choose what I want it to look like. Goes along. I've given it just the title, and there it is, kind of just creating my presentation in real time. And yeah, and certainly the English language version of this, which was really, really good. So I'm assuming that the French one is pretty good as well, but you know, let me know if it's not. Yeah, so get to the end of it. So, and I can just run it in PowerPoint and off we go. Yeah, so it's quite impressive to see, isn't it? I can see from your reaction that that is like quite interesting. It'll go across, yeah, it usually wraps up with a nice conclusion at the end there. There we go. So the reason I wanted to show you that is that it impacts both assessment but also the way we work. Yeah, because these are going to be the tools that are part of our kind of everyday activity. I had to know about Gamma and go somewhere to do it. Within a few months, this will be built into PowerPoint, Google Drive, whatever you use, yeah, so you won't even have to go somewhere else to do it. Right, I just want to step back now. We'll come back to what that kind of means for things like assessment, but I just want to now step us back and just run through some of the basics about ChatGPT. So I know I said it was not all about ChatGPT, but understanding some of the basics there kind of helps us understand what's going on here. So ChatGPT, it was created by a company called OpenAI. Now, this is a bit confusing in their name. They started open, not for profit. Now they are a for-profit company. So there are other competitors. They are, technically, they'll say we're a capped profit company, actually, if they ask. But their cap is like something like 100 times their revenue. So whatever, it doesn't feel capped to me. It's trained on large chunks of the internet, plus some books. And I want to delve into that a little bit more, particularly as we're at the language conference, because that's all about language. So we'll go into what's actually there. Once it's done that, humans get involved in the training. And now this is important because it's bringing in the kind of bias and alignment of the people involved in the training. So it's not a pure version of what you've seen on the internet, which would contain all sorts of bias and untruths. It's being steered to align with AI's kind of take on the world. And what that does, it makes it kind of polite and things like that, but it also introduces political bias. And it works solely by predicting the next word given a sequence of words. Now, actually, it's not quite word. It's something that's called a token, which can be a part of a word, and it can be punctuation and so on. And the reason I mentioned that is that some colleagues that were looking at it in Welsh noticed that it was actually inventing Welsh words because it was taking parts of words and they rendered it something that looked Welsh, but because there was less in the training set, it was not real. Doesn't, as far as I know, happen in other languages that there's more on. I'll come on to what's actually in the training set in a moment. So, it was trained, first of all, there's an open data set that any of us can look at called Common Crawl. And this is basically everything that's public on the internet scraped. And it was originally put out there for researchers to use. And you can kind of imagine there, if it's everything on the internet, it's going to have good stuff, bad stuff, lies, horrible material, all sorts of things. And not necessarily what would be useful for a large language model. OpenAI did something I found quite interesting. And this is for GPT-3, the version that was released in November. They've kept quiet what they've done since then, but I suspect it's very similar. And it's just because the competition's hotted up, basically. They wanted to locate the stuff that was good on the internet. And they did it by going to Reddit, which I don't know if any of you have used, but and chose things that Reddit users had given 3 commas to. Now, Reddit can be a strange place, as you're probably aware. Even without that, its demographic is predominantly male, young American. Okay, so what it's done is we had a data set that was quite biased. It's to get the good stuff, they've kind of introduced another bias to it. They then used that to kind of create a model to pick the rest of it. And it's quite fascinating, really, that this doesn't actually manifest itself more. You can do it if you say, name the 10 most influential writers in the 20th century, you'll kind of see a very Western American bias to it, for example. But it doesn't manifest itself as much as you might imagine. But it's still useful to know. And then they put Wikipedia in and a whole bunch of books that they've never really told us what they were. Now, there was some, I just thought I'd see if I could find out what the language makeup was of Common Crawl. And I've picked here all the languages that was over 1%. So you can see there, obviously, English is the dominant language of it, so you'd expect its performance to be, way better in English than anything else. And you can see there the other languages that have got a, reasonably significant amount in it. I think there's about 160 languages in total. And it's kind of fascinating in a way that it does work so well on the languages that make up a relatively small amount of the training set. Right, so once you've trained a model on all of the internet and not done anything else, you get something that is, it kind of works as you'd imagine, I guess. It's a very unfiltered version of the internet. It will say racist things, sexist things, it's highly biased, and it makes up an awful lot. And you may have seen chatbots in the past be released that hit the news. Microsoft did one about 4 years ago, for example, that they put on the internet, and it had to be pulled within about 2 days because it got so racist. Now, it's kind of, I think we all expected a similar thing to happen with ChatGPT, but it hasn't. So OpenAI did a couple of things. First of all, they employed a lot of workers in Kenya to tag the most offensive of the material. Okay, so this was a pretty unpleasant job, and it hit the news at the time because of the working conditions and so on, but there were people there actually helping us identify the worst of the material. And then they employed other people to essentially train it to answer questions well in a way that a human would. Okay, so they employed a whole group of people, first of all to model answering a question, and then to rank the answers. And that did an amazing job of taming it. Yeah, so I suspect that when those of you that have used it, generally it's bland, polite, it's quite hard to get it to say anything offensive. This process very much aligns it culturally with OpenAI's worldview. And there's been a lot of debate about whether that's a good thing or not, and it's something that's useful to understand. I mentioned that it works by predicting the next word, and this is quite fascinating, I think. Developers can go into the back end and actually have a look at that in action. So I've just put in a sentence here right about Jisc and artificial intelligence, and just highlighted one of the words in the sequence there. So you can see the words that it could have picked. So the way it works is it doesn't always pick the most obvious word. So it could have gone off in another direction. And this is why it kind of sometimes can end up going off on a complete tangent. If it had picked a word that didn't make much sense in it, the next it will get increasingly inaccurate. Yeah, but it really, although it doesn't feel like it when you use it, it really is just predicting a sequence of words. So, once we've got that, I just want to run through 3 bits. It was called the good, the bad, and the ugly. So those are the pictures, if any of you spot it. I changed it to capabilities and some other stuff instead. So what that gave us is something that can write plausible sounding text on almost any topic, and it can do it authoritatively and convincingly, but not also always truthfully. It can generate answers to all sorts of things. I think the one of that list that people quite often don't realise, it's really good at things like multiple choice questions. So you might think, okay, can't do that, but it's great at it. It's getting increasingly accurate with each release, as I described at the beginning, generates unique text each time, and it's great at all sorts of other things like text summarisation, asking questions about text, and so on. Limitations, so it can and often does generate plausible but incorrect information. Now, it's getting better at this, but if you ever chat to it about something that you know an awful lot about, you'll start to spot all sorts of inaccuracies. These are quite often called hallucinations, but I don't like that term really because it's implying some kind of humanity to it that isn't. It's purely as a result of the text prediction going wrong. It includes things like false references. So if you ask it to create references, it will. The falseness I found is getting more subtle, so it's quite often page numbers wrong now and things like that, but it was inventing all sorts of stuff back 2 months ago. And it also makes false claims about its capability. So you should be wary. Never ask ChatGPT if it can do something. It will usually lie. And I've got a specific example at the end on that one. And it was trained until information only up until September 2021. Okay, so if you just use the free version of ChatGPT and ask it about something recent, it won't know the answer. That's changing with other tools like Bard, Bing, and so on, which do have access to the internet, so it's not that simple. And some of the concerns, these are just a few of them. I think it's just really helpful that we're kind of mindful of the flip side of the coin on this one. So I've talked about the culturally and politically biased output, and I've talked about it generating unacceptable output. It's got a high environmental impact, okay? So training these models takes huge amounts of electricity. And the truth is that it's almost impossible to find out quite how much. People have tried to estimate, but it's a lot. Yeah, so we just need to be mindful that there is a downside to this. There might well be an upside in that AI can also solve a lot of environmental problems. Human impact, I've mentioned the people involved in the training of the data. Obviously, it's impacting on jobs, all sorts of other things as well. And there are concerns about the ownership of the training material behind it. So if any of us have got public information on the internet, it was probably used to train it. We didn't know that was going to happen. There's a lot of concern in the creative arts industries about the way images are being used. And I think we need to be mindful of the danger of digital inequality. And I'll give an example of that one in a little bit. But essentially, students that pay more can get better services. A similar approach is now being used for voice. So OpenAI have created something called Whisper, which is a voice recognition system. And the way that the difference there between traditional voice recognition is they're moving away from trying to get human parity when it's really quiet to try and aim for human levels of robustness. Yeah. So we're really good at understanding speech when it's noisy, when there's a lot of background and things like that. So they're trying to kind of solve that problem. And obviously that has quite an impact on its use in things like translation in a kind of real word setting where there's other noise. And I thought I'd have a look quickly and see if I can find out about the training data. So it's by far the biggest kind of training data of this kind of stuff. 68,000 hours. I think that's like, 680,000 hours out by a factor of 10. That's like talking constantly for about 80 years. It's an awful lot. And the graph on the side is the languages that it's in terms of accuracy. And I was quite intrigued by, I don't know why, but it was better at Spanish and Italian, even though there was more English in the training set. But, you know, that side is going to improve dramatically over the next couple of years, I think. Right, so that is enough about the techie side. I'm just going to run through some of the challenges now and the things we're seeing. So let's start with assessment, because this is where the kind of hype started. And none of us could escape the headlines at the start of the year. The press kind of loved the doomy side of it and told us that all of our students were going to cheat, that there was no point setting homework and things like that. And I think it's rare for anything that any of us are involved in to actually move into mainstream discussion. And it was helpful in some ways, I guess, but in others it wasn't. Particularly, I think, the way that it framed students as cheats. We're broadly seeing three tactics for assessment. The first one is avoid. So this is revert to something that AI can't possibly do, an in-person exam being the obvious one. Most people don't want to do that. It's moving us away from authentic assessment that we want to move for. And bluntly, it's creating too many logistical challenges. We haven't got enough room to run everything as exams. The next one is outrun, and this was quite a popular kind of idea a few months ago, and the idea was that we could devise an assessment that AI can't do. Now, I've talked about the pace of change, and that makes this quite a difficult tactic to go for, to be perfectly honest. So to give an example, and sorry, this will be really simplistic for language education, so don't assume that that's what I think you really do. But I was trying to think of one that would be relevant. So at the beginning of the year, these models couldn't look at images. So people were saying things like, okay, what we need to do is to set an assessment that's got a picture, and we ask people to then describe it in another language. And AI won't be able to do that, only a human can do it. Then in March, OpenAI announced that ChatGPT would be able to look at pictures and do it. Last week, this started to get rolled out to users of the Bing browser. Okay, so it started to come to everyone. Our assessment cycle is such that if we'd have taken an outrun approach, it wouldn't possibly have worked. So it's quite tempting, but it's quite challenging. So most people have moved on to the idea, okay, so we adapt and embrace. We embrace the use of AI, we discuss the appropriate use with students, and we work out a way of actively encouraging its use in assessments. That's easy to write, but in reality it's still pretty hard to balance that with academic integrity. And I'm not going to claim I've got the answers to that today, but I can tell you a little bit about the work we're doing there. An awful lot of discussion about AI detection, so I'll just say a little bit more about this. So a lot of us have potentially got access to AI detection tools. It's built into Turnitin, although most institutions have turned it off at the moment. So first of all, is it possible to detect AI? And the answer to that is a really helpful sort of, right? So nothing today can conclusively prove that text was written by AI. There are three kind of main ways of doing this. So one is to look at the writing style. Now, some people also claim they can do this. ChatGPT by default has got this kind of bland, authoritative voice. Our CEO Heidi described it as mansplaining as a service, which I thought was quite good. The problem is that you can change its default voice really easily. Another approach is to take a whole bunch of stuff that AI wrote, a whole bunch of stuff that humans wrote, and basically train a model to tell the difference. OpenAI tried to do this, and to be honest, it was almost a random number generator. It's really hard. Then watermarking, I won't go into too much detail, but there's a lot of discussion in the future that we might be able to watermark text, but at the moment that doesn't exist. Now the problem is that each technique can be defeated really easily. My favourite technique is just to say, use the word the less to it when it's writing it. That changes its style, and I've defeated every AI detector that I've ever seen just by that one little tweak to the language, yeah? And it generates false positives. And this is quite problematic. One of the student unions actually started to campaign yesterday for their institution to have it switched off because they were having to deal with so many false accusations about use of AI. So it's a challenging area. Just want to come up with a couple not to do. Just because these keep coming up, I'm sure none of you would do these, but first of all, don't paste text into ChatGPT and ask if it wrote it. This comes up almost once a week. We see somebody on the internet say, I've done this and it proved that my students are all cheating. It lies on this. There's it lying about me. I know I wrote that because I saw me do it. It's confidently claiming it wrote it. Yeah? And it's because it's just predicting a sequence of words. And also, you don't want to put your students' work into something that you haven't got kind of appropriate data protection policies and so on in place. And don't just Google searching for an AI detector and try it as well. A lot of these are rubbish, frankly. They don't work properly. And again, you're putting your students' work into something that you've got no contract with and you don't know what they're doing with the data. So, yeah, a couple of things to avoid. Okay, what are students saying? So we've run, I think it's 5 workshops with between 10 and 20 students. This isn't a massive scientific sample, but we wanted to get a feel for what students were saying. Most students think that it should be allowed in assessment. There were some against it, and understandably actually, these were in students taking English courses, and because obviously it was kind of like taking away the thing that they were learning to do. They all want more clarification about plagiarism detection. Automated marking, I won't say too much about, but they don't want AI to mark it, and I think that's completely understandable. Why get the student to write something that no one's going to read, but they're quite happy for AI to assist with the process. They're in favour of assessment changes, which won't be surprising, and they want the stuff that they do to have real-world industry experience, including the use of AI. So they don't want it banned. They want to be able to get employment skills. So I'll carry on with the thread, talking about the things that students say to us. So we wanted to find out how they were using generative AI, and on this, right, I've put a more acceptable, less acceptable list, but that's kind of not set in stone, hence the question marks on it. A lot of discussions about it. So some of them are just putting the question in and getting the answer out and pasting it, yeah. We know that's happening. But most are doing it in a much more sophisticated way. So they're having iterative discussions with ChatGPT about their assignments. They're using it to rewrite sections, to create structure, to get feedback. And as a research tool, although they do understand that it's not great as a research tool because of its propensity to get facts wrong, but they still kind of find it useful because it's friendly. And translation, which I thought I'd just say a little bit more about why they were using it as translation here. So don't take this as a massive sample. It was a few non-native speaking students that said this. And obviously they could have just been using some other translation tool. But ChatGPT can do other stuff. So it can change the reading level. So if you've got a scientific paper, it can simplify it. It can change the voice. It can explain things. And you can engage in a discussion about the text. So it might start as a translation tool, but it can do lots of other things that traditional translation tools can't. Their student concerns, so information literacy, they wanted more information about how to understand its trust and accuracy, some concerns about data privacy, detectors I've mentioned. They wanted, on the regulation side, they really wanted all universities to adopt the same approach. Some of us were saying, well, our university bans it, and the one down the road lets it, they're going to be in a better position than me. Staff use, they want staff to be confident but transparent. So they're more than happy for you to use AI, but they don't want you to pass stuff off as your own. Quite sensible. Equality, I've talked a little bit about, got one more slide. They're worried about over-reliance, so they're worried that they'll start essentially becoming less able to do things because they rely on AI, and they're concerned about employability. Cost, just to give an idea, ChatGPT, the paid version, if you've got $20 a month, fast, reliable access to the latest model, searching the web, a whole bunch of plugins, another £25 on, say, Grammarly with its generative AI, tenner a month for that presentation stuff. You can see that if you've got £100 a month to spend on AI as a student, you're going to be able to do some great stuff compared to somebody that hasn't. So a lot of concerns about that. Right. Let's just talk about some stuff, time-saving stuff now. I'll tell you a little bit about one that we're doing first of all. So we're just kicking off a pilot of a product called Teachermatic. And this was, we're doing this in the FE sector to start with, but it's probably relevant in the university sector too. And this was generated by a bunch of educators who wanted to solve the problem of you all having to get really good at writing prompts, what's called prompt engineering. So they took a whole bunch of tasks that you commonly do, like course planning and activity generators, and create something where you just click the box, tell it what you want, and it generates the answer. So We're doing that in 8 colleges at the moment. We'll have some very initial feedback at the end of this month, and then we're doing a 1-year study to see how that goes. So it's interesting to see how that works. And then we're hearing about people that are training the staff just to use ChatGPT well. We have a Jisc event called Connect More, where practitioners talk about what they do. Nice use case, again, was generating an activity plan, but also using ChatGPT to simplify the language in it for dyslexic users, for example, but sharing that with everyone. And if you want to try that, we've got a guide on our blog post about some ideas for getting started with it. Marking, so I mentioned that students don't want their work wholly marked by AI, which is understandable. We've piloted something called Grade. Now this only works in maths, but we expect other equivalents to come in all sorts of areas. And what this does is it learns as you mark. Okay, so then when you see something, when it sees something similar to you've said before, it will basically generate the feedback for you. So it's maintaining your voice, but if you've got 100 identical papers to mark, it's speeding up the process as you go through. How widely applicable it is outside of that particular concept about STEM, don't know yet. It's when you've got a whole bunch of papers where the answers are roughly similar. But they're all, across the board, we expect to see AI tools that will assist with the marking process. And then some of the, this is not directly related to learning and teaching, but speeding up some of the admin tasks. We're just piloting one to speed up the analysis of the National Student Survey. So your institutions put a huge amount of effort dealing with the comments in the National Student Survey. There's, as you know, a race to kind of get the data out first and find out the thing that you can put in the newspaper. So we're piloting something with a number of institutions that automates that by looking through topics and things. So kind of other uses around admin stuff. And the last one I just want to touch on is learning and teaching opportunities. Now, this might seem strange that this is the shortest section, but I think we have to remember that this has only been with us in a mainstream form since November. We're seeing lots of ideas about how it can be used, but these time they are just ideas. We haven't had time, say we collectively, you research in this space, to prove any of these works. So these are interesting ideas we're seeing. So a couple of examples that I'll just share here that could translate, I guess. So the first one was someone telling us about how they were getting ChatGPT to pretend it was Lady Macbeth, to bring Shakespeare alive to people. And the students were then chatting to ChatGPT as if it was Lady Macbeth, and the students enjoyed that. And then an intriguing language-related one. So this was somebody teaching English as a foreign language, and they were using text generation. Now, to get a good picture at text generation, your language has to be really, really good. Yeah? So what they were doing is essentially motivating the students to write really good descriptions in English, which wasn't their first language, to generate excellent pictures. I think it was a kind of a fun activity, but not necessarily one that I'd thought of. We're then getting AI trained by to act more as a tutor. So the Khan Academy are leading in this space, working directly with OpenAI. But this is, can we train ChatGPT to act more as a coach and not give answers directly? I really want to try this, but they're only showing it to people in the US at the moment. The videos look fantastic of it coaching you rather than answering the question. And one that is quite interesting when we start seeing convergence of AI and things like VR. So one pilot we did was something called body swaps, which we did to help with soft skills. And you go into VR and it tells you to stop waving your hands around and measures your eye contact and stop saying and things like that. Then it basically swaps you so you can watch yourself and see the feedback, which is quite interesting. And it's moving to all sorts of other spaces, and I'm sure that there'll be lots of use cases in this in language education. The next one we're looking at is medical. We'll be holding a showcase on that, where there's a lot of interest in using it to get medical practitioners to practice speaking to practitioners, students, and so on. So interesting stuff in that space too. So, what next? Really, kind of my message to everyone here is to get in and try it. The students really want you to have a conversation with them about it, yeah? But they want you to at least have an understanding about what you're talking about. So get in, try ChatGPT, try some of those other ones, try it with your assessments so you can have a conversation about it. And, you know, next year, get ready to talk to your students, because that's what they're asking. So, if you want to find out more, share this afterwards, but we've got a Jisc mail list and we give a kind of 2 weekly newsletter on things that are happening and stuff like that and publicise our events.